Well, good morning. Yesterday was the halfway point for the legislative session. We have quite a few things to cover this morning. I gave a speech to the legislature this week updating our revenue numbers. They have increased since my budget address in December. It looks as though we will have another $8.6 million in ongoing revenue. That is an adjustment from my previous budget address, and also another $51 million in one-time spending that will be utilized by the legislature as they work on their budget. Additionally, in that speech, I talked extensively about the revenue numbers, that they are about 125 million over what we had previously projected, and that with that, our principles shouldn't change. We still needed to focus on long-term commitments to conservative principles and values that will benefit the next generation. I'd like to see them put money into trust funds, into the reserves, pay off debt, and then continue to focus on long-term projects such as infrastructure that will make a difference for not just the next 5 to 10 years, but 20, 30 to 50 years. That's why you see us focusing on things like broadband investment, the DEX building in Huron, and other entities and projects that will be incredibly important for years to come to help us to grow and help families be successful. I'll give you a quick update on some legislative bills that are priorities on Monday. My bill that would simplify some zoning regulations within cities did pass out of the House. Now remember, this bill is going to help us keep housing costs lower. We have a lot of people moving to South Dakota. We're seeing some demand in the real estate market. This bill will help us make sure that regulations aren't adding to those increased costs, and we want to make sure it's not too expensive for South Dakotans in the process. This bill will help with that. Yesterday, my bill to recognize out-of-state healthcare licenses passed the Senate, meaning that it's now headed to my desk for signature. And then yesterday as well, my bill that would reform training requirements for law enforcement officers passed the Senate as well. I wanted to give you a quick update on where we stand with the marijuana initiatives. Yesterday, I and legislative leaders announced our plan for implementation of IM 26. This bill will specifically give us some flexibility and give us an opportunity to do and set up the program correctly. Doing the right thing takes time, and our state has contracted with industry experts on the implementation of these marijuana regulatory systems. And that industry expert that we have contracted with is Cannabis Public Policy Consultants. They advise that it typically takes longer to get these programs set up and do it correctly, sometimes more than 2 years, to get it effective, sustainable, and functioning. Our plan that we laid out does two things essentially. Gives us some flexibility on a date for implementation, but also sets up a task force, an interim committee that would meet before the next legislative session to address all of the various elements of implementing this measure. Everyone involved in the process is determined to fulfill the will of the voters in this arena. We just want to make sure we've addressed the health aspects, the public safety, the implementation, the revenue, and make sure that we're doing that correctly going forward. In addition, we heard earlier this week from a circuit court judge regarding the unconstitutionality of Amendment A. There was two different points that were addressed. One of them was it was a two-topic measure. She determined that it unconstitutionally violated the single subject rule, which the voters overwhelmingly approved just 2 years ago, and then also determined that it was more of a constitutional revision rather than an amendment. We continue to expect to see action at the Supreme Court, and we'll wait for those determinations to happen as well. With that, I will open it up for any questions that you may have.
Governor,
Yes.
I know there are a lot of bills out there, but there are two in particular that sort of look at ag taxes, and that there are certain people who might be taking advantage of ag tax, and they might not be, I think, as the sponsor said, legitimate ag pursuits. But as it's written, it could force some small farmers to sort of sell their land, and even some tree farmers in the Black Hills. Do you have any, have you had a chance to look at that legislation, and do you have any thoughts on that?
I've heard a little bit about the bill, but I have not looked at it. So we're still following it through the legislative process. We do want those that are involved in agriculture to be able to be taxed appropriately, but also those that are homeowners and those that are in the commercial process as well. So I know there's some debate going on with legislators on that bill specifically, and we'll continue to follow it. Yes, Stephen.
Good morning, Governor. Stephen from AP. Your bill to shield privacy for donors, I think, is up in the Senate today.
Okay.
Already passed the House. So it would apply to nonprofits that influence public policy. One of those, Fight for Our Future, is connected to some people related to your campaign. I'm wondering if you could tell us what that organization does and why donors would need protection for it.
Well, the bill you're specifically referencing does absolutely nothing on campaign finance. All it does is say that the state government has to follow the state law. And what it does is make sure that the state government can't be compelled to release information and violate the state law. So nobody that is affiliated with the organization that you referenced is affiliated with my campaign today. And that is where that stands. There was some misinformation in one of the articles that came forward, and I hope that you will be pretty transparent in the fact that this bill does absolutely nothing to the campaign finance statutes in our code. It is specifically just saying that the state government needs to follow state law. And if people want to start disclosing more information and more donors to different charitable organizations, then they can come back to the legislature and pass a bill to do that.
Just to follow up, the misinformation that you referenced
Is in regards to who is affiliated with my campaign and who's affiliated with that organization.
Okay, so you would say that there's no crossover between your campaign and
Correct.
that organization. Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, Joe Sneevy, Argus Leader. Yesterday in appropriations, the appropriators discussed your request for $5 million to get a new airplane or a new aircraft. The Department of Transportation Secretary, when asked if a jet is on the table as a potential next purchase, he stopped short of saying no, I guess. So I'm going to ask you, if these planes aren't leaving the state very frequently, do you see a need for potentially a jet?
I'm not involved in those conversations. I'm not the one who would be picking out the new aircraft. And again, in all of last year, I used the state aircraft to leave the state once, and it was to go to Minneapolis to catch a commercial flight for an event, an official event. So, this is not something that I am making a decision on, that we will contract with people who are experts at choosing the correct aircraft for the state's needs.
Speaking of the budget, could you talk a little bit about how your office sees sort of the state budget playing out in years to come, as opposed to maybe how the LRC is seeing it and as that's being set?
Well, I can speak specifically to revenue numbers. This year we have increased revenue that is coming in, and you're seeing some debate over appropriation bills and where those dollars should be spent. In coming years, I expect our budget to get tighter. We are seeing historic levels of money come into the state right now through several different elements. Through some stimulus money that came from the federal government, also from increased visitation to our state, and from people being out there starting businesses and doing a lot of different building projects as well. There's, to say that it is specifically tied to the federal stimulus dollars would probably be inaccurate, because then every single state in this country that received federal stimulus dollars should be seeing a surplus as well. I think that the way we've approached the pandemic and the way we've allowed businesses to operate and families to operate has resonated with folks, and they've chosen to come here and visit and invest money, and our economy is benefiting from that. What I would say is that because we're seeing unprecedented growth in our revenue right now, I don't expect that to continue. I think we'll still have a strong economy, but we need to be prudent and smart and plan for the future and know that those revenues will more than likely decline. And I would much rather have money in reserves today than come back 2 to 3 years from now and be asking everyone for spending cuts. I know once you invest money into programs, people hate to see that reduced in the future, and it's much more difficult.
Real quick follow-up.
Governor Noem, Adam St. Paul, Dakota Broadcasting.
Okay, Adam, I'm going to take one more question in the room, and then I'll come to you.
Yeah, just real quick follow-up. What might be driving sort of, I guess, obviously the unprecedented growth, I get that, but sort of the cooling off. We've been hearing a lot about, the prosperity of South Dakota coming out of this pandemic. Why would that sort of cool off as we head further down the road?
Well, if you look at our main funding streams, they come from sales tax, also contractors' excise tax. We also are seeing that people have money to spend, and so they're out there doing so, and that's where that benefit is coming into the state budget today, is because there's excess sales tax. But we do know that with some of the policies that are coming out of Washington, D.C. right now, that we'll see increased energy costs, and we're heavily dependent on energy in South Dakota. We need it to run our farms and our businesses. It's cold in the wintertime. It's pretty hot in the summertime, so we just heavily utilize a lot of the energy supplies that are being now overregulated, or we're just changing where we get them, and it's going to drive up costs. We're also seeing more regulations come forward, which cost people more money, which ends up with less dollars being available to spend in other areas. So we're just trying to be smart and look at the trends that are happening, and as well, the decisions the federal government's making on continuously borrowing money and spending it and sending it out, it has consequences. And in a few years, the debt that this country holds is going to affect our economy, and it's unsustainable. So I expect to see increased interest on debt, and that will have an impact on people as well, and on everything that we use in our day-to-day lives. Yeah, oh, sorry, let's go out to the phone.
Governor Noem, Adam St. Paul, Dakota Broadcasting.
Yep, go ahead, Adam.
Thank you. Back on IM-26, I think most people would probably understand that, additional time is needed to get a program like this off the ground. However, we are talking about people's medicine here, and I'm just wondering, is there anything the state legislature can do, or you could perhaps push for, to be a stopgap measure so that people can get their medicine while we try to fully incorporate IM-26, per what was voted for?
Yeah, I think that's a conversation that can be had. I just am concerned about also implementing this correctly. Once we implement this process on the medical side, and because it is a medical issue, I want to make sure that we're doing the right thing for people, getting them the help that they need as soon as possible, but also making sure that it's well regulated, well run, and is done correctly. Joe.
Governor Patrick Callahan, South Dakota Broadcasters.
Okay.
13 retail pharmacies were expanded for vaccine distribution yesterday. Those 13 are all East River. I've had some stations and people ask about when will we see that Tier 2 type vaccine distribution available in western South Dakota.
That was specifically tied to partners within these pharmacy companies that were willing to partner in getting the vaccines distributed. I had not heard that none were West River, though. So let me look into that and see if we can get some answers for folks out there. We are seeing more and more vaccines come online. The fact that Johnson & Johnson vaccine is coming online as well will be very helpful, especially since that's a one-shot vaccine. And in regards to that, the more people that we can get vaccinated, the better off our state is going to be in the long run. So we are one of the leading states in the country for distribution, and the more vaccines that we get, we'll make sure that they're getting in people's arms as soon as possible. Joe?
I've been following your homeschool bill,
Okay.
The SB 177 that Senator Steinhauer is carrying on your behalf. That was heard this week, 2 committees, Senate Education. There was a lot of talk about the lack of schools or the state's ability to keep a track on these kids that homeschool, the lack of accountability that's how they characterize the bill as what it would do. Do you have a response to that? Are you concerned that some kids could fall through the cracks if we don't have some sort of oversight allowed to the school boards?
Well, I think that this issue is one that the legislators are debating, but we're bringing the bill because we think it is an important measure for families and for stronger families, and to give them the opportunities to educate their kids in how they see fit as well at home. So I know that that's an argument that's been made for many years, and schools often are the first reporters of some kind of neglect or abuse. But using that in this conversation, I'm not sure negates having the bill and the opportunity for these families to participate.
Todd F., Kello.com News.
Okay, go ahead, Todd.
Thank you, Governor. it's been a while since we've heard anything about the Attorney General investigation, and I know it's out of your hands and the Department of Public Safety's hands. You've given a lot of evidence or information that's been available to the public and to the media. Why do you think it's taking so long? Is this a matter that the prosecutors, do they know what they're doing? Is there something else going on behind the scenes? It seems that in most circumstances of a crash of this type, we would have some sort of either an indictment or law enforcement clearing. And then it seems to be taking on more importance as the Rapid City Journal reports today that the major law enforcement agencies in South Dakota do not want the Attorney General to weigh in on officer-involved shootings because of the cloud with him running over Joe Beaver. So just any thoughts you have on that, Governor?
I do not know why it is taking so long. And that's really all I could say in answer to your question, Todd. Again, we've released what we can release so far. We have pushed for the victim's family to get at least some kind of action on behalf of Mr. Beaver, and we're hopeful that soon these prosecutors will come to agreement and decide what to do going forward.
Just follow up, is there anything else you think your office can do to push this along any further?
No, not that I'm aware of, and we have had those conversations multiple times.
All right, thank you, Governor.
Thank you. Stephen?
There's a certain line of thought among some Republican lawmakers that regardless of the outcome of the challenge to Amendment A, that popular sentiment seems to be moving towards legalizing recreational marijuana. And rather than putting it to the voters, lawmakers could craft the policy that they want, and they could reflect the will of the voters to legalize it this year. I'm wondering, what would your thoughts be on an initiative like that and legalizing this year?
So you're saying the majority of legislators want to do that?
Oh. I'm saying there's been discussion among some Republican lawmakers
I see.
on that. Yeah.
Well, I'm still not in favor of legalizing marijuana. I still believe that it is a bad idea for our state, and that is certainly a prerogative that these legislators can pursue. And putting a bill through the legislature, I would not be inclined to sign one. Yes, is there a question on the phone at all? Okay. All right, have a great day. Thanks, guys.